But Brandon, let's move on into the world of college football. And the first thing we are looking at when it comes to college football is, I said it to Sean as we were at B-Dubs this weekend for Dave's birthday. On the tube was Notre Dame, and they were blowing out the Florida State Seminoles, just wiping the field with them. And I said, hey, you know what? Your last game to be worried about is coming up next week when you guys play the Orange. And he said, don't remind me of it. I don't even want to think about it, because that's the team that the last game where Sean has always said, hey, that's the one where we really got to be worried about. But that's what we're going to look at, Brandon. Syracuse and Notre Dame this upcoming weekend. You've got Notre Dame, a perfect 10-0, just beat Florida State 42-13. 2 games left on their schedule. Syracuse at a neutral site, and then they will play at USC to end the season, whereas Syracuse has Notre Dame, and then they're at Boston College to end the season. But if you look at Syracuse, only 2 losses this year. They're 8-2. Both of them, one to a good Clemson team where they only lost 27-23, and then a game that I think that Syracuse wishes they had back, 44-37, a close one to the Pittsburgh Panthers. But Brandon, I am going to ask you to start, just right straight from the gut. Can the Orange upset the Irish this weekend and kind of put a kibosh on any Notre Dame college football playoff hope?
You always ask me the can they, and I think I always give you the same answer. Well, they could. They could. Anything's possible, of course, and I've given that answer multiple times this season. But I don't think the Orange will this weekend. I don't think they will. I think that they will give it a good run, but I don't think they'll end up doing it. I do have to give some accolades to Syracuse. They're 8-2. They're a ranked team. They're having their best season since 2013 when they went 7-6 and had a bowl game against Minnesota, which they won. Mm-hmm. They've played really good football. You mentioned their 2 losses this season. It's a game they could have and most likely should have won against Clemson, and then a game that went to a couple of overtimes against Pitt. They've played well. They've won their last 4, and this could have been a game. They were probably hoping that they wouldn't see Ian Book as the quarterback. Well, most likely are going to be seeing Ian Book as the quarterback. But the Syracuse team has done a lot and turned around this year. The last couple of years have been awful. This is a team that can actually be proud of what they've done this year. They're going to a bowl game, that's for sure, and they've had a great season. Mm-hmm. With all that said, though, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are just better. They're a better team. They have a better defense, and they can do more offensively. When Ian Book is in there as the quarterback, they can pick you apart. Ian Book to Miles Boykin is potent, and it's dangerous. And most people, most teams, most defenses cannot stop that. Dexter Williams on the ground has been outstanding. His 770 yards that he has to this point and 10 touchdowns has been great and a huge lift for the Irish. One thing that I saw this past weekend, even a huge blowout win against Florida State, it's that Brandon Wimbush at quarterback, and that's who they went with, and he did a formidable job. But he turns the ball over too much. He makes too many mistakes, whereas Ian Book seems more calm, collected, confident in his throws, and makes a lot better throws than Brandon Wimbush does. What this game is going to come down to, though, it's not going to be the offense so much. It's going to be the defense. Syracuse has given up this season around almost 30 points a game. Notre Dame is almost 10, 12 points less than that. Their front line, I think, is going to give Syracuse and the Orange a lot of trouble. They're going to definitely be rushing the quarterback, and that is going to be where I think Notre Dame is going to win. They're going to get turnovers. They're going to win the turnover battle come Saturday. That's where the Irish win in this game. It's defense. It's not necessarily going to be offense. I think they'll play well, but it hinges on how they play defensively. That's what I'm looking at, but that's also why I'm saying that Notre Dame will get the win.
Well, I'm going to agree with you in the fact of, first off, I'm not going to give my winner right now. I say that, and at the end I usually do, so don't hold me to that. But I agree with you in a sense that this is going to be a defensive game, but I'm going to say it differently. Turnovers. That is going to be what tells the story in this game. The reason why I say that is, first, let's look at Eric Dungey, quarterback for the Syracuse Orange. In the 2 losses that they have this season, his passing numbers, when it comes to touchdowns to interceptions, 0-1, no touchdowns to 1 INT against Clemson, 1 touchdown to 2 INTs against Pitt. I know he had 2 rushing touchdowns against Clemson. I know he had a rushing touchdown against Pitt. But when it comes to the passing, when he's had more interceptions than touchdowns through the air, the team has lost. Now look at Ian Book. Ever since he became the starter against Vanderbilt, the only game to me that has been his kind of, notch in the armor, the weak spot, that weak point where you're put the sword underneath that chainmail, underneath that plating, because that's where this armor is weakest, was when this team played Pitt on October 13th. And the reason why I say that, every other game, 1 touchdown, no INTs, 2 touchdowns, no INTs, 4 touchdowns, no INTs, 2-1, 2-1, 2-0. That's the only game where he had even 2 touchdowns to 2 INTs. And that is what this Syracuse defense needs to do. They need to force Ian Book into bad situations to where he doesn't just end up 2 of 2. He ends up maybe 2 of 3, 1 of 2, 0-1, where he's going to have to, Ian Book, in order for Syracuse to win this game, Eric Dungey is going to have to be positive in the touchdown to interception ratio. Ian Book is going to have to be in the negative, because even if you keep him equal, let's say Eric Dungey goes 1 touchdown through the air, 2 on the ground. If Ian Book stays even if he has 2-2, even if he has 1-1, this Notre Dame team will get it done. You have to force Ian Book into more interceptions than touchdowns this Saturday.
I think you're right with that, Ricky. I mean, that's clearly what you're going to have to do to be able to get the win. But I look at the last couple of games for Notre Dame. Obviously, the Florida State game was a blowout, but I look back to even the game that they played against Northwestern, and Northwestern, who's a good team, in the Big Ten West, and have won the Big Ten West. Notre Dame, played a tough team, and Ian Book was just cool, calm, and collected. 343 yards and 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. And this is a Northwestern defense that has been able to get a number of turnovers this year. That's why they've been able to get so many upsets. Mm-hmm. I think Northwestern has been on the upset side, the one that's gotten the upset 3 times this year. Mm-hmm. Ian Book did not play into that. That's the same type of thing that's going to be happening this weekend, where Syracuse, they're not bad. They're good. They're 8-2. They're good. They're, like I said, they're going to a bowl game, but they're going to be trying to play for the upset here. And they win, they ruin Notre Dame's complete season. The whole season is lost if Notre Dame loses, because they're not in the playoffs then, and everyone knows that.
Well, and I was talking today when I was at work to one of my fellow teachers at work. He's a huge Notre Dame fan, and he had mentioned, he goes, you know what? If they go undefeated, there's no way they could be out of the playoff. He goes, but if they have one loss, it's going to be tough because they don't have that conference championship. And one thing I brought up that he even was great, that could be a negative for Notre Dame. Let's say Notre Dame loses this game and they end with 1 loss. Then let's say Georgia in the SEC title game beats Alabama he was saying even an Alabama team with one loss would be put into the playoff over a Notre Dame. So, like, with Notre Dame, they need, like, this is a must-win for them, because if they don't, because they're not in a conference, because they don't have that conference championship, if they don't win this game, they're kaputs. They're done. They're not going to be in the college football playoff, because even a team like Alabama, maybe even a Clemson, could lose a game and still be in the playoff over them.
I really got to thank Dino Babers and Syracuse for how they've done this year, because they're not a bad team. Mm-hmm. They're not a bad team. And Brandon, why are you saying that? Because in another season, if this was last year's Syracuse team, we're talking about a possible Notre Dame overlooking them, looking to the next game. USC, we will beat you. We need to go and beat USC. We'll beat Syracuse, no big deal. But we'll start game planning for USC. And again, maybe that's not how the coaches are talking, but that's how the players are probably thinking. Oh, we're ready for bring on Syracuse. We're going to go out there. We're going to win by 30, and then we're going to go out for the bigger game against USC, the one that we know we got to get. That's it. If we get that one, we're good. But because Syracuse is good this year, they cannot overlook them. They cannot overlook them. And that may actually bode a little bit better in Notre Dame's favor, because these last two games, and even with USC next weekend, two teams you don't want to overlook. A good Syracuse team and a USC team that has been so up and down this year, they could fall into a win against Notre Dame if Notre Dame isn't careful. So I'm just thanking Syracuse for being good this year, so that Notre Dame can't take them lightly and has to actually prepare, feel confident, look at that game as being a true test, and then hopefully win it and get to the next week. They're not by any means out of the woods, is Notre Dame. They're not with this game, and they're not with the next game. But truly, they're not.
Because it's at USC.
It's at USC, and again, anything could happen. Don't you tell me that USC will not bring every single thing and gun they've got to be able to beat Notre Dame and ruin that season. USC be saying, our season has sucked. We're going to make sure yours does too.
Well, it would become their national championship.
What's that?
It would become USC's national championship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what it would be. And that's why this game against Syracuse is so extremely important, but it's something that, again, Notre Dame cannot overlook. I don't think they'll overlook. And next week is going to be just as important. It's funny because we talked and we've said on the podcast that, the second half of the season for Notre Dame, man, that's looking a lot better. I think it's been more excruciating than the first half.
True. And I mean, the other thing that I'm going to be interested to see in this game is Notre Dame's front seven. And I know there's a ton of things about how this defensive line has become so dominant, and they're one of the main forces on this defense. And I know I'm going to bring back up when I was out to dinner Saturday with Sean and Dave, Sean also being a Notre Dame fan like yourself, Brandon. He was talking about, I can't remember his name, but he's like, there's somebody on the defensive line for Notre Dame that Sean is just enamored with, and he just loves and think he's going to be a great NFL pro. And the thing I'm interested to see in this game is that Notre Dame rush defense versus this rushing attack for Syracuse. Because if you look at the stats this year, Notre Dame's defense gives up about, I'm going to round up from 138.9 to just 139 yards per game. They've only given up 14 rushing scores, and they give up an average of about 3.7 per attempt. Syracuse on the year runs for about 4.7 per attempt. They have 32 rushing touchdowns this year and average about 216 yards per game. And the thing with Syracuse, the reason why their numbers are like that is it's not just Mo Neal out of the backfield who has 700 yards on 119 carries. it's also Eric Dungey, who is almost 700 yards and has the most rushing touchdowns on this team. This Syracuse team, Mo Neal might be the guy who has the most yards, but they also got Strickland and Howard as well, who have 6 touchdowns each. I'm also looking at that. If Eric Dungey can limit the turnovers and not turn over the ball, how is this rushing attack for Syracuse going to fare against the Notre Dame front 7? I'm going to put the linebackers in there because they're important against the run game as well. But this dominant front 7, the dominant defensive line, how is that going to do against this Syracuse rushing attack? Because if they're able to get the run going, that could be not good for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but I think it goes absolutely both ways there.
Mm-hmm.
If either team is able to get their rushing attack going, Notre Dame's obviously is potent, and we've seen Syracuse's be just as good. If they're both running really well, we're going to see ourselves probably in a shootout, and that's where it's even more important of, okay, what team is able to get the turnover? What team is able to get the big turnover or the big stop when they need to? That's what it will ultimately come down to. You talked about it earlier. I think that Eric Dungey has had more of has been a little bit more prone to turn the ball over than Ian Book has, and it would certainly be the worst time for Ian Book to become turnover prone here against Syracuse.
Well, Brandon, to end everything for this segment, I'm going to go to you first. I know you were just talking, but I'm going to go to you first. What are your final thoughts, final kind of conclusion for how this game is going to play out? And then if you want to give your prediction, you can, or you can say wait until later in the podcast if you're listening in audio form, or go check out the picks video on YouTube. You can do either one, whatever you like. What are your final thoughts about this game and how it's going to play out this weekend?
I just think that Ian Book has done, since he's come in for Brandon Wimbush this season, he's done an outstanding job. He's been cool, calm, and collected. He just seems like he's been doing it a long time in the backfield there. He's really good. He's really good, and I don't want it to seem like, oh, wow, why are you so shocked? But he hasn't looked like a guy who's been thrown into the starting role after a couple of games into the season. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of guys a number of games to get going. It didn't take him a number of games to get going. He's been pretty good from the start. If he just continues to do that and this offensive line continues to give him time and open up holes for Dexter Williams and others, this is going to be a really good game for Notre Dame. And if their defense continues to do what they've done pretty much all season, and that's limit teams, whoever it's been, they have been able to limit them and give the ball back to the offense. If Notre Dame does that, if they play Notre Dame football the way that they have all season long, as even head coach Brian Kelly said, this team has been the same all season. And they haven't been that up and down from game to game. You know what to expect, and hopefully you can expect Notre Dame win.
Well, and just my final thoughts with it is I think that we're going to see a tough one. It's either going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be a shootout, and they're just scoring left and right, and it ends up being like a 45-42 game for the winner. Otherwise, it's going to be a real close one. Defense is kind of buckled down, and it'll be like a 19-17 or a 20-14 kind of a game. And I'm actually going to, I don't know who I'm going to pick. I'm going to be completely honest. We record these in order of segments, obviously. And for my YouTube listeners, obviously, this picks video is already up as it goes up the day before this, but at this point of recording, I don't know who I picked because I don't know who I'm going to pick for this game. So if you're audio, keep listening on through. I will have that pick later for you guys, but this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. What kind of a game are you expecting? Do you expect Notre Dame to be better, Syracuse to be better, close, blowout? What's going through your mind for the Syracuse-Notre Dame game this weekend? Let us know down below.